Well,
but then you can move it to the
all right. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm Shallegra Moye. I am going to be moderating a conversation between Mrs. Dr. Angelique Drakeford of the Urban Academy, Drs. Shannon Wanless and Caitlin Spears of the 3Rs, and myself, Dr. Moye, about what it means to have a racially based reading intervention in your school. And so we're so glad that you are here with us virtually, and it's going to be an exciting conversation. And so the title or description of our session is that the 3Rs and the Urban Academy leadership endeavor to ask, what does it look like to expand the reading repertoire, build and deepen relationships while centering racial equity of those who are tasked with teaching Black children, while engaged in a cross organizational collaboration. And so we've thought about that as what it means to break up with blame, right, and move into action as we think about racial equity, reading outcomes, and relationships. And so that is what our conversation today is kind of centered upon. And so I am going to invite this illustrious panel to give an introduction of who they are, and then we're going to jump right into the conversation. And so, Angelique, I will begin with you if you want to tell the audience who you are, what your role is, and what describes you as a leader.
Ooh, what describes me as a leader?
One thing, just one thing that describes you as a leader.
Yeah. So my name is Angelique Drakeford, and I am the principal and chief academic officer of the Urban Academy of Greater Pittsburgh Charter School. You know, one thing I would say about myself as a leader, just very simple, is authentic. Just being myself, continuing to grow as a person, as a leader, just really helps to just navigate this space around staff, children, families, and just sticking to my mission of changing the narrative for Black students.
Thank you so very much. Caitlin.
Yeah, hi, my name is Caitlin Spear. I'm the Director of Literacy and Learning at the Office of Child Development at the University of Pittsburgh School of Education. And I lead the classroom strand through that work of the larger 3Rs project. And one thing about me as a leader, I would say I like to be the lead learner. I'm always learning, and I really try to model that ability to learn and take what we know and bring it into action, but also trying to lead. I think with that puts us in a position of humility to listen and learn and take what we're learning from context, take what we're learning from the literature, take what we're learning more nationally, and always be open to maybe we got to make a change. So yeah.
Thank you for that. Shannon Wanless.
I'm Shannon Wanless. I'm the Executive Director at the Office of Child Development and faculty in the School of Education at Pitt, and co-lead of the 3Rs with Shallegra Moye. And I would say what describes me as a leader is values driven, for sure. When you get clear on your values, all the hard decisions become a lot easier because you ask yourself, what would you do based on what you know is right? And so for the 3Rs, our values are making a more just and equitable world for children to learn. And so it's a bumpy road. It's not clear always what to do next, but it's clear how to go back to our values and use that as a compass for next steps. So that's me.
Thank you so much. And I am Shallegra Moye. I'm the founder and executive director of Brilliantly Blessed Community Health and Wellness. And it is through that role that I get the distinct honor and pleasure of co-leading the 3Rs with Shannon Wanless. And so one thing that describes me as a leader, I would say, is so many things, but I'll go with adaptive leadership. I am learning, or have learned and continue to learn and appreciate the value of what it means to focus on the adaptive part of organizations, of relationships, versus those technical things that you can say, okay, if I fix this, if I fix that, if we do that, then we'll get to said outcome. Where in adaptive leadership, it's really about understanding the motivations of the people that you are leading with, right? Understanding, the politics that are always at play within any organizational context. And so that's the one thing that I think describes me as a leader. And so with that, I want to thank you all for sharing a little bit about who you are with our audience. And I'm going to begin now to facilitate us in a conversation again around what it means for a school to be ready for an intervention such as the 3Rs, which is explicitly focused on the interaction and integration of reading outcomes, racial equity, and relationships. And so this conversation, just to ensure you have landed in the right place, is really geared for school leaders and administrators who will be in a position to make a decision about, inviting a similar or even the 3Rs into your own school. And so with that, I'm going to start with Angelique, who is the leader of the Urban Academy, the Urban Academy Charter School, who remains one of the partner schools in the 3Rs. And so I want to ask you, Angelique, as a leader, as someone who gets to decide, whether an intervention like this comes into your school community in the first place and then remains, right, one of your key professional learning opportunities for your staff. What are some of those considerations that you find yourself continuously having to navigate, think about, and make space for?
Yeah, so one comment you made was, how does a school get ready? You never are really ready. Because you don't know, when you're talking about race, you don't know what things are going to come up. It's an ongoing process. So we may have a plan and may think we want to hit on these certain things, but there's always curveballs depending on what's being discussed right there in that 3Rs. So I think some things to consider is, well, there's two major things that came to my mind. One was just really getting an honest gauge on that community that you're walking into. And I think school leaders have to be honest about where they are when it comes to race and equity and relationships, because unless you're honest about it, you're not really going to be able to do the real work. It's kind of just a facade of, oh yeah, we're doing this. No, we need to really dive in. Do you have these conversations? Do you not have these conversations? And just really be honest about it, because how are you going to get effective work done? And I think the other thing too would be really, and this is seriously in all schools, because this is a true issue. One, Black history is not Black history, it's history, right? I hate that it's already designated as one thing. It's a part of everyone's history. So the one thing about 3Rs, well, all the teachers love that 3Rs gives books away all the time. But are you a school that's already diving into, we can use all the fancy words, culturally relevant pedagogy, cultural representation, Are you teaching to your demographic? And even if you don't have all Black kids, there should still be representation of everybody in your classrooms, because it is everyone's life. It is all of our history. So, I think just really being honest about what individuals are actually doing in their classrooms and starting to have that rich dialogue around that. And then you also have to make sure when you're getting into a program or partnering with a program like this, just reminding everyone to just continuously be honest with themselves and to make sure you're providing an opportunity for them to go and share in safe spaces within the community as well. So there's a lot of things to consider, but I think those are two. I think just the honesty around all of it is important so that 3Rs knows how to come in and where to start.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much. And I just want to add before I kick it over to Shannon to, share her perspective on that, what it means for 3Rs, right, to consider before they decide who they might want to partner with. We love that we can give away all the books. Yes. And we read the books regularly ourselves as a matter of practice. Just want to put that out there. Thank you. Okay, Shannon, what would you like to say?
Oh, I love the word honesty, Angelique, because it's not about starting at a certain place. No school has to have a certain amount of racial equity work done to say now we can partner with the 3Rs or another initiative like this. Is about being honest. Wherever you are, this is where we are. Now let's start together, and there's always an opportunity to move forward and grow from there. But, as you grow from there, there are moments where you think, oh, did someone see that in my school, or did that really happen, or should I pretend it didn't happen, or maybe we could not talk about it? None of that works. None of that works. So it's just about seeing it, being honest about it, and talking openly about now, where do we go from here? And I would add one more word to that also, which is trust. So as you're being honest, I think it's easier to be honest when you really trust each other, that even if you don't always have the same ideas, you are both moving toward the same place. The 3R staff and the school are trying to move toward the same place of making a more racially equitable place for children to learn. And so when you're both coming from authenticity, then you can trust each other. You can keep saying, but I saw this, but I'm not sure about this. How do we do that? And that's where the good, sustainable work happens. And I think that is contagious to teachers and staff too, because they see that open, honest grappling. And that's what they're going to need to be doing in their own classrooms and with families and with each other. And so it just creates a space that is just primed for learning and growth to happen.
Thank you for that. And thank you for bringing that in. And Caitlin, I'm going to invite you in shortly for your perspective on that same question as the person who delivers, right, the intervention. That trust piece, it works both ways, right? We're not going to get honesty without trust, but it's in fact modeling that honesty, being honest about where we are. That's also developing trust as we go throughout the process. And something, Angelique, that you talked about, right, where once we decide to go on that learning journey of becoming more racially equitable, we're never actually prepared for everything that might happen, right? And so as we think about those two kind of foundational pieces of honesty and trust, as we make mistakes, right? Because certainly mistakes are going to be made in these relationships. When we're honest about that, right? Again, it just deepens the trust. And I think it's been beautiful in this particular relationship where we have watched the trust really develop. Like I can say we came into this partnership with a degree of trust, right? Recognizing each other as fantastic organizations doing fantastic work, right? Which helped us come together in a more authentic way, right? And then deepen that trust over time. And so, Caitlin, what would you like to say about this topic?
Yeah, there's so many pieces. I think the honesty and trust is critical. I think particularly when we're talking about race, my role as a white woman in facilitating some of these conversations, I try to be really open and transparent and also know there's limits to that. Grappling both within and across and trying to communicate what those factors are. Certainly when we're thinking about like teacher learning, right? This is something I'm constantly trying to center. How do we focus on the kids, right? Like, because that's who our commitment is to, the kids and the families and the learning, but also be human in this space. Again, making space for breaking down some of those walls around sense of perfection in this work that I think often comes up. These are, and some of these are things that come up in lessons along the way, but I think all of those factor into a lot of our delivery conversations. Again, building relationships. What are the contexts for these, especially when we've done so much of this work over Zoom? There's major beautiful things that can happen on Zoom, and then how do we go deeper? What does that look like? There's a lot of pieces, but I think again, the honesty piece is so critical. Thinking about power is another factor I think that comes up a lot, right? Like, what's the power that classroom teachers have? What power do I have as a facilitator? How do these things work, right? What's our relationship? How do those pieces happen? How are leaderships engaged in all of this? So I think we're not just thinking about the content of the books and supporting, right? We're thinking about mindset shifts and shared values and conversations, right, in the classroom and how that's going to link to practice. But we're also thinking about all of those sort of very real world relationship factors, even just with the adults in the room. So there's that becomes a lot to manage too. But I think it's by naming them and attending to them that we are able to grow together.
Thank you, Caitlin, for raising that, because it speaks to something that I said as in the opening, and something that is certainly, I would imagine, on the minds of administrators, school leaders, as they're listening to this conversation, particularly in the context we're in the world, right? Those two P's, power and politics, right? And what it means to go boldly, right, with an intervention that's explicitly focused on racial equity. And then again, relating that back to reading outcomes and relationships in a school building. Angelique, I'm gonna put this back over to you to speak to those two P's in regards to the 3 R's.
It was power and
Politics.
power and politics.
Okay, so folks, there you go. Now you know.
It gets really intense when you think about that, because I am an educator in an all-Black school, an institution that was not designed for them. So it's this constant battle of I have to meet certain standards and rules and regulations, but still be able to navigate, be flexible, and just straight up change and throw things away without getting in trouble, right? So now it's just like, I'm gonna do what I gotta do what I gotta do. We're gonna do what we have to do for our kids. And if the power, whoever that is, the state, politics, whoever, try to say something different, then I'll just take that hit, because I'm going to do what I have to do for our kids. So the goal every year is to continue to change the systems within, because we found ourselves, we all grew up within the same systems, right? So there's just certain things that we do naturally. So even when you think about discipline, you think, why am I doing it like this? This is the way it's always been done. You don't just suspend kids. You don't just, you know what I mean? It's just, now, am I a part of the school to prison pipeline? You know, you have to ask yourself those questions, because there's just norms that we have that have just been placed on us and that we live. So you have to constantly reflect and really try to ignite your own power and think about what you can do to change things. And then, you know, push that out on your people, like on your staff, on the children. I tell our children all the time, your Blackness is your power. And that's my motto all the time. Their Blackness is their privilege. So we need to use that. When we get into politics, maybe I should get into politics. That's what I've been thinking about, but I'm too honest to be a politician.
Listen, I'm here for it, but yeah, it takes a certain disposition.
Yeah. Probably
And
wouldn't work out for
organized
me.
politics.
Yeah, it wouldn't work out for me.
But in terms of the politics within an organization, what might you offer for school leaders on that front?
I have a motto that is, I don't see myself as everyone, in certain instances I do, as their boss or as their supervisor. I call it leading like a partner. And we got to work together through this, because we all are in different roles. And sure, as an administrator, as a principal of a school, there are certain decisions I have to make, but I like to do those collaboratively. Now, there's some that's like, boom, I got to do what I have to do. But at the same time, we have to work through this, because I've been in the classroom, right? So there's certain things I understand. So it's important that I ask those questions, because now I haven't been in the classroom in a while. So walk me through this, because people have to understand just the day-to-day of a teacher, from the moment the kids walk in to trying to provide some intervention, checking homework. You still got to teach. That's the big thing, right? But there's so many things. So if I'm saying, okay, now we have to do this. Well, now the state says this. Well, now I need you to do this. That's a lot that's happening at one time. So it's just having rich dialogue. Like, well, this is what I'm presented with, guys. What do y'all want to do? And that's kind of how I move internally, because it just works better for us and me, not the authoritative type.
Listen, if I could say something else about my leadership style, it would be distributive, right? Because I can't do it all. I'm not supposed to do it all, and I don't desire to do it all, right? There's no I in team. I imagine that when folks watch this, they're going to be head down, pencils moving, like I see Caitlin and I are during this discussion, right? And there are so many rich jewels that you just gave us, Angelique, but there are maybe two that I want to really lift up. Risk taking as a leader, as an administrator, right? Risk taking on behalf of your students. Reflecting on and igniting your own power, right? And Caitlin, I'm going to invite you in next, because when I have the opportunity to co-facilitate and to lean in and support the work of Caitlin and Jen, who also is one of the other pieces to the classroom strand, that's one of the things that I talk about, right? Because it's important to me in my personal and professional practice, leaning into your own power, right? I completely, I don't buy into I'm empowering you. She's empowering him, right? Because we all inherently have our own power, and we need to be reminded of that, right? And so I love how you said igniting your own power. And one of the other things that you spoke to that I think is really important as leaders and administrators are listening to this conversation to consider is their distance or proximity from the classroom, right? And I thank you for amplifying that, right? That as we become leaders and administrators, that typically takes us further and further away from the very thing, right, that propelled us into that. And then how that changes really our perspective of, what interventions we take on, and just a whole myriad of things. And so I thank you for sharing that. And so Caitlin, I'm going to invite you in, right? Because you really opened up the door for this part of the discussion. And so I want you certainly to talk about that power, right? And that politics piece as you think about your own positionality, the other P, right? As a white woman coming into, at this point, school spaces where there are mostly Black children in attendance, right, that this intervention is being designed for, but where the teaching staff and even administrative staff is typically white. So share with us what that's looking like for you, how you're navigating that.
This is so rich. I'm definitely taking all of my notes. And yeah, I think a piece we think about a lot with teachers, and I will just say at UA, it feels different at some of our schools than others. But that idea of igniting power, of leaders modeling risk-taking, of teachers feeling empowered to think, to grapple, to take pedagogical risks, to be in these complex spaces, to know it's okay to make mistakes, but also that the stakes are high, right? All of those pieces are really critical. And Shallegra, that piece about distance and proximity to the classroom too, right? My own distance from the classroom is growing in ways that hurt my heart sometimes. But that ability to know all of those complexities that you named, Angelique, and to say, what is this we are asking of you teachers within all of those conditions, right? Like I try, those weigh heavy, right? I try to tap into my own journey towards within racial literacy and thinking about these things as a white woman and naming mistakes I have made, and also how that, again, drives towards those high stakes, and to model that with teachers. And it does change, right? That it depends on the audience at the school. It depends on the context, right? So there are contexts where those other conditions of risk-taking and support with leaders maybe aren't as, they're in a different place. And so then sometimes it is really about just navigating within teacher differences and learning and helping teachers step into their power. Right? It isn't, I'm not empowering them. It's just asking, what are the questions? What are the conditions? What can we read and think that can set off some different sparks? But then still very much being aware that like doing that as one teacher in a school where those conditions aren't being supported does look different and there are different risks. So we're constantly thinking about that versus being in a school where, again, we're working collaboratively to create these conditions with leaders across teams, with community. So I think all of those pieces are factors. And again, my positionality shifts across those things in ways where sometimes I can center that and sometimes I need to learn to decenter that. And that's absolutely a learning process for me too. So I don't know if I really answered the question, but I have so many thoughts around all of these things. So that's some of what's spinning in my head.
Ooh, great.
Can I jump in and say something too? To that?
Absolutely.
And I think another point, Caitlin, to your point, well, kind of add on, those leaders that are a part of 3Rs, that's where the initial buy-in has to start. Because this is not, and I advocate for 3Rs. Don't add 3Rs to your school to check a box. Like really do it, you know? So I think when you guys, I'm looking at what is happening in the classrooms based off of our sessions. And to walk through this building today, our teachers were able to come back on Friday and to see that those books are placed out there. But a part of it is outside of that representation right there, I'm telling the teachers, you all need to be reading to your kids every day in general, right? So now I could go back and say, now let me see what books they're using. Let me see what type of dialogue they're having. So that's a part of my walkthrough process now. So the leaders have to buy in and help facilitate what it is you're all trying to do.
Angelique, you are bringing the heat. Shannon, I want to bring you in, but I also want to sit with, I want to peel back a little bit more what you just said, Angelique, because absolutely, right. Shannon and I, we're always, and Caitlin and everyone who's connected to 3Rs, right? We are always talking about the necessity of leadership support of the 3Rs and not the check the box support, but that as a leader, you value, you believe in, you lean into, you're modeling, you're demonstrating. And so, one of the things that you shared with us that maybe the audience cannot see is that you are a Black woman working in an all-Black school with at least 50% Black teaching staff, if not higher than that.
We have one white student.
Yay! Congratulations.
She's actually my niece. Yes, we do. And yeah, about 50% of the staff is.
And so thank you for clarifying that. I believe, Angelique, that some of your positionality, right, that third P word, in some ways may make it, I don't want to say easier, but more urgent, more necessary, more like you're willing to take the risk to make sure that the things get done, to make sure that the right intervention, such as a 3Rs, is in your building. What do you say to the white male school leader, right, who is in a community that maybe is not racially diverse or not very racially diverse, but serving a school building full of mostly Black children? Like, so there are nuances, right? As we used to say, there are levels to this. What might you offer for someone who believes it's important, right? Because we believe all of our partner school leaders and administrators believe this work is important. But what would you offer to somebody in terms of how they might lean into their own power, ignite their own power, right? And be willing to take those risks?
Well, that's a really good question. I think first I would have to clear out any assumptions. Just because a part of some of my work and my research is actually around the socioeconomic background of educators and how that impacts Black students. So sometimes what we think a white person, when we may think a white person is causing harm, but there are Black people, Black teachers that can cause just as much harm as not more, if not more. So I think the first step would just to kind of gauge, and I almost would streamline it the same way based off of the demographic. So if the demographic is predominantly white, it's like, yeah, but there's Black people in the world. There should be Black people in your books. So you need to focus on real things, not these systematic things. And I think that, I will have to reflect on that some more. That was a really good question. I'll have to reflect on that some more, but I think the first thing would be, I don't have the definite answer, but I think the number one thing would be to just not assume that because it's a white male that they may not understand the work, because a lot of people, no matter the race or the gender, they have the same deficits around this work. So it takes, for me personally, I think the reason why I'm so connected to our kids is because I didn't grow up much differently than them. And that's an assumption when parents walk through the door, that I was raised in this, whatever people want to call normal, successful household. No, I had some of the same struggles they did. So the understanding looks different. How I interact with them is different, because there are things that I give them that I either didn't get at school or I should have gotten at school. So that creates a different type of connection, which makes it a little easier for me to just kind of tap in, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I'm actually glad that you didn't have an answer, right? Because what we're hoping, right? And I personally, Shannon and I and Caitlin, we would love the answer whenever you come upon it,
Okay.
right?
I'll
But I think that
process.
yeah, right. Part of what we want to do is really inspire folks to be doing their own internal reflection about, some of these larger questions. I cannot believe that we are like at the halfway mark of this dope conversation. Shannon, I feel like we have not heard from you in far too long. I'm going to invite you to just come in on where we've been, in the first part of this dialogue. What's resonating? What are you like, hey, you folks need to know XYZ?
Oh, that's a big question, Shallegra. There's so much happening here.
She has these big questions today.
You got I'm still back on the P's, on power and politics. I have to say, there's so much baggage the university carries in the way I think it's done wrong in the past, and sometimes right, with balancing power, trying to have mutually beneficial relationships, trying to lift up community, but sometimes lifting up itself instead. And that's one thing that makes me extraordinarily proud of the 3 R's, because I think we lead with listening and lead with trying to figure out, when it comes to power, what is the power the university has to bring tools, to bring resources to schools, to listen to what is on your mind, what are you looking for, and what can we bring that can help that be easier, because it's not always expertise. The folks who are in the schools are the ones who are knee deep in all of it. But I listened to Angelique describe a teacher's day. Like, you can't be in all that and then lift up your head and look at what's going on nationally, or look at what the research says, or pull some new resources. It's too much, right? So that's what we bring to the table, to be able to watch, almost like, when you're watching a child learn to write and they have the wrong size pencil or crayon or something, like if it's too thin, they're struggling to hold it. And then as a teacher, you can find one that's a little bit wider, and you just kind of put it near their paper. Like, that one might work better, and you see them pick it up and it's easier just because you had that resource, or you could look from the outside. And so I think that's the power of the university, to be able to come and listen and observe as an outsider and bring the resources and tools that serve the direction that the school is looking to go. And really, it's such a loaded, power is such a loaded question. I think, but to me, that feels like a field shift right now, instead of going in and saying, we made an intervention, now do it. That's not what's going to work. That's not what's going to work. Instead, the 3 R's is all about, let's listen, let's grapple together, let's bring our best, you bring your best, and let's see what we can accomplish together.
And I'm going to invite you to stay there for a few more minutes, Shannon, and I'll allow you to select the whichever other P you want to talk about, whether that's the political, right, the politics of an organization, whether it's the university or when we start to cross right into others, and or your positionality, right, how that how you see that showing up right in this work as you are determining school partnerships relative to the 3 R's, right? And how you in your positionality are always making sure that that racial equity that is in the middle by intention is never overshadowed, if you will, by the need, right, to focus on the reading. And for us, the relationships really kind of come out of that. So hopefully that's a smaller chunked question for you, but we'd like to hear what you're thinking about that.
You think that's a small question?
No, I said smaller. I think I said smaller. You don't do everything big. Sure.
Oh my goodness. I actually think those P's that you just brought up are really highly related, positionality and politics, and that they're really centered in truthful, honest, open dialogue. And the one thing that I just have no tolerance for anymore, the more I do racial equity work, the more I can't stand it, is having elephants in the room. I feel like that's from my own background or my own raising, that they're just sort of these things no one's talking about that are taking up space. And the better you get at listening and quieting your own voice, you can really hear all the in-between things happening in the middle of a school faculty meeting or in the middle of a university meeting. You start to notice, okay, that's out there and nobody's talking about it. And that's what's going to do harm, the thing nobody's talking about. So the first thing to do is say, I noticed this thing nobody's talking about. I think we should talk about it. And it just sort of cuts through, I think, half the politics. Things just brew, drama brews, and it gets bigger and bigger. And maybe that brewing has to do with my positionality sometimes. Maybe it's if when I watch myself go into a school like Angelique's, it's very different than going into a school where I'm in a room full of white administrators and very few parents of color in the room. We're having a really different conversation, and the way my positionality works in those two spaces, figuring out how much do you lean back? How much do you step forward? When is it your job? When is it my job to say, I notice this elephant right here that we need to be talking about, that maybe because I'm white, I can name it easier and say, let's bring this up. Or maybe I'm in a room where I'm like, because I'm white, I shouldn't be the one to name this one. I should step back a little bit. So just reading the room and knowing when you can name it and get it out there, the more we're open and honest, I think, the more we figure out how to push through politics that are just causing so much harm.
I like that. I like that. Thank you so much for answering that big question. Let us go into a new part of this conversation. And that's to talk about what has surprised you. What's something that has surfaced as a result of being in this cross-organizational collaboration that's focused on reading racial equity in relationships that you did not anticipate. And now here it is. And even how we process through that surprise, right? So this could be something that was, positive, certainly, and something that, wasn't necessarily negative, but again, it caught you by surprise. We weren't ready for it. And now here we are navigating through it. And so, Angelique, I'm going to kick off to you first.
I think some of our challenges created the surprises for us. You know, ever since
Can you
COVID.
name one or two of those challenges for us
Sure,
so that
sure.
the audience is clear?
Absolutely. So one major challenge we had was during our meetings, majority Black people would speak and hardly a few white people would speak. So it became an issue of why aren't white people speaking in these moments? To a point where now there's a lot of dialogue around it outside of 3Rs. Why? And I'm like, well, for me, sure, I asked myself that question too. And I'm like, but I also know some of their personalities. I know there's some things I probably don't know for sure, so it really caused a lot of conversation in the building, good and bad. But what was happening, the surprise was, it actually was happening. It just wasn't happening in that space when people wanted it to happen. So some of the staff who we have cordial conversation, ever since COVID hit, we didn't have the ability to be as close as we were because everyone had to stay distance. We're a family that we break bread together, we hang out together, we take care of each other here. And we weren't able to do that for a little while. So everyone doesn't know each other as well as they knew them before. So, I have conversations with all the staff, of course, but people that didn't normally talk to me about anything personal could come and sit in my office and have a conversation or shoot me a text message just saying, thank you for understanding, and being honest. I'm afraid to speak because I don't want to offend, or I'm afraid to speak. I don't want to say the wrong thing, or having conversations about how it's uncomfortable for them sometimes to have conversations with parents about certain things because they don't want to offend the parent. So the surprising part was people that I didn't really talk to on that level actually wanted to have those conversations, shoot text messages, make phone calls. And then what started to happen is people are also doing that within the community, right? But how sometimes people tend to focus more on the negative than the positive, unfortunately. So I had to be that voice to say, no, I wasn't going to use any names, but what you are saying you want to happen, it is happening. Like, it is happening. You got to relax. And then you have to ask yourself, why are you so hung up on this? Is it for your own self-gratification? You really want to know, like, what is it that makes you so focused on this, right? And I'm sure there are some people that may not, we don't know who people are at home, okay? Let's just be honest. But that was a really huge challenge that also turned into a surprise, but also really opened the door more for people here to really talk. I'm always who I am. You say something defensive, I need to talk to you at 3:00. That's just who I am. But it also opened the door for me to have conversations with some of even the Black staff to say, okay, if you're offended by this, have a conversation about it, because it's not what you say, it's how you say it, right? So it's just having that conversation with someone, or saying to the white staff, no, you can talk to this person. They will answer questions for you. They, give it a shot, see what happens. So just kind of being that advocate for everybody within the organization, and still leaving my own bias and my own, constantly reflecting on that and making sure, even thinking before I even give out the advice to say, because some people, their personalities also don't mix. So it's like, no, I don't talk. No, that's her. But, just being honest about it and real about it. So it created a space. We are an organization that we speak about race a lot, but it's better sometimes when you have outside people coming in, because there's a way they don't know you. This is fresh. Because for me,
Objective.
very. So if I'm holding trainings and things on these type of things, the relationships get in the way, and people may assume that I'm saying this or doing this for these reasons. So there are just certain things I feel it is better to have a 3Rs come in, so that those challenges do come, because you need challenges sometimes in order to grow. And then those surprising moments come as well. So
Thank you.
challenging.
Beautiful. Shannon, as the executive director of the Office of Child Development, as you think about the relationships that the 3Rs is in with multiple diverse school leaders, administrators, what's been most surprising for you?
I have to say, we started these relationships with the schools, with literacy organizations, with our community champions before the pandemic. We called before the pandemic. It's one thing to say yes to partnering with the 3Rs before you knew there was going to be a pandemic and before there was going to be a huge summer and years of racial reckoning, right, on the national stage. So we asked for a commitment before the context just shifted rapidly. And even before all this happened in the world, I was nervous about trying to ask for a commitment on a reading focused intervention because reading is hard to move. I thought we were going to have to be honest up front. You're not going to see changes in test scores tomorrow. This is slow building work over time. And so we can't drop everything in a year if we don't see big enough change in standardized test scores. But boy, even through the pandemic, I mean, through all the upheaval our nation has seen, through all the politics that has become so much louder, all the noise, all of the stressors, our school principals are so stressed. There is so much put on them. And they're still committed to the 3Rs, and they're still committed to inviting folks to come in. Even if we can't come in, we have to on Zoom, come in to talk about racial equity and bring it to the front of everyone's mind. I mean, to me, that's absolutely amazing. I would think you'd have to just like get everything extra out of your plate and just focus on keeping the building standing, right? But no, there is so much commitment to keeping this work going. And I get calls and texts of people saying, I saw one of my teachers do this. You won't believe it. I saw something 3Rs in the classroom. And is it all turning into standardized test score change immediately? No, it is building in that direction over time, but the amount of energy and enthusiasm over those changes along the way has really, it's just filled my heart with the authentic commitment of our school leaders. Like, this is something, whether they are always at the front stage of it or not, that they want and they're excited about and they are willing to be committed to. It's incredible.
It is incredible. Caitlin, anything you want to share as we move into the 10-minute mark? Oh, wow is right.
Going so fast. In terms of what's surprising, I don't know. I think that the part Angelique raised about like the challenges and growing in the challenges and navigating white silence and again breaking down like part of this relational work we have to do to make to drop that perfectionism, but also recognize that where some of the teachers are coming from. I don't want to cause harm. I don't want to cause offense, but also maybe silence is part, right? Like all of that. There's so much growth and rich learning we can do if we do it in relationship. So that is hard, but also like a joyful thing to lean into. Like that is an opportunity for growth. I will say the other thing, it's not surprising. I am the granddaughter of a children's librarian. I am obsessed with picture books. I always have been. I've been on the power of these picture books, but I will say the things we learn from these books, the deep ideas that teachers raise every session when we bring them these books. These are books that I have coded with students and had a 3-hour conversation when we planned, and the teachers are just like, and did you see this? And did you think about this? And like the things that can come up, and I think again that they can then take that lens into the classroom. Those are I won't say it's surprising because I was like, yes, it's going to do it, but it blows my mind almost every session, just like the rich conversation and learning that we can do with these books, both as adult learners, but also as pedagogical practitioners and where they want to go with it. It's always awesome.
Best book you guys introduced us to. Now, I thought we all knew the books. Okay, I thought we were all good here. My Name is a Song. That was the move.
Mm-hmm.
That was everyone has it now.
Love it.
Yes.
Yes, that was great. Because we tell our kids all the time to, if someone says your name incorrectly, correct them. And I struggle with that my entire life. I still do. I still don't always correct people. But I tell all of our students to. But that conversation with 3 R's around my name is a song shed a lot of light to individuals on, okay, yeah, I need to make sure. And it's like, ask. If you don't know how to say, can you tell me how to pronounce your name? Just ask. So yeah, that was great.
So beautiful. Listen, I want to bring us back for a few minutes to breaking up with blame and getting into action. So I'll ask you all, or ask you each to, in 3 minutes or less. I know, right? In 3 minutes or less. Talk to the audience, share with other school administrators who hopefully are going to be attending SBL, and or those who will see this in the future and think, I want in on that. What does it mean for you as you think about leading your school or leading this project or leading the classroom intervention to break up with the blame of racial oppression and spring into action? Shannon, I'm going to start with you.
I mean, action is the key to breaking up with blame. That's how you get out of just this deep white guilt. But at the same time, you can't act too fast because then you're like bull in a china shop, right? So you have to figure out, how are you moving from, I think, from a place of learning about injustice and racism and feeling, I can only speak for myself, feeling deep guilt about what have I done in the past? What is my lineage of what has been done in the past? What am I doing today that I can't even see that I'm doing? I mean, the weight of that, knowing you're walking around the world, not even able to fully see whatever harm you're enacting, especially, I don't know if this is true, but I think especially as an educator, we all come from a place of loving children, loving families, wanting to make the world a better place, right? And just so to sit with that kind of guilt, it's horrific, but to move it in to action, but in a way that is listening, that is grounded in humility, that is intentional and constantly reflective. Take a step and then kind of lean back and look, how did that go? Take a step, listen, check in. Who are the people around you that can reflect back with you and hold you accountable? How can I call Shallegra and say, did we do that right? What did you think? How did you see that? What did it look like from your angle? So that you have folks that are broadening your perspective beyond your own, and then keep inching forward, because too fast is this is the lesson I'm trying to learn in my life. We want to go fast because we want to change the world, but too fast causes harm because you can't see what's happening clearly enough because you're like Roadrunner, like just zipping forward, right? So inch forward, don't sit on blame, just look, watch, check in with others, inch forward.
That was so beautiful. Caitlin?
Love all of that. I think a lot about that similarly. We talked a lot about in some of our sessions also the role of emotions. And so I think figuring out I'm a person, I have a lot of work to do with breaking up with blame and all sorts of things, but particularly around white supremacy and racial injustice. I think, is the blame fueling anger? And is anger fueling action? Is it about guilt? Is it, and so just figuring out, like, where are my emotions that I actually have to process? That again can lead me toward effective action. I think a key thing for all of us as we're learning to see these structural factors is to both, it's grappling to, we talk a lot about like the individual versus the structural, and this idea that we're all entitled to more than just an individual response, because we are all, Angelique, when you were talking about like all of the factors that are weighing on you and on school choices and things, but then where do we also have power? right? And so figuring out, how do I see all of those pieces and use discernment, but also stay whole and stay human and stay in relationship? And I think that's where the dropping the blame, even when we name the structural factors, but still making space, we'll say, can we have blame and accountability, or break up with blame, but still be accountable? And what does that look like? And we need to create new conditions and new relationships in order to do that, because so many of our structural factors and the way our relationships are created in this world completely are at odds with that. So it is about recreating these new things and going slow and making space and making commitment and checking in and staying human and staying humble. And that's hard. That's a lot of work. I got to work on that every day too. But I think those pieces all have to be part of that conversation too.
I'm so inspired. Angelique, what does it mean to break up with blame and move into action?
Dang, you want me to go behind all of that? That was great. I was jotting some thoughts down as you ladies were speaking, and I some things are very similar, but my number one was reflect. Because you have to really get to know yourself and know where you are in order to even move forward. Because some people don't think there is no blame. It's just like, it is what it is. And some people, it's like so much guilt. And it's like, you have to just reflect on who you are. And then I put number two, learn. Just because you have to really, like, say, for instance, a white person right now in this day and age, you didn't own a slave, right? So stop acting like people are blaming you and calling you like a slave owner. That's weird. However, you do have to look at, do I still possess some of these oppressive behaviors? Because some of that is interchangeable. So you have to be careful of that, because just how people are brought up, you have that in you. So you have to constantly, I think the first part is breaking up with what you already have going on inside you and what you've already been exposed to, and just knowing the right from the wrong, understanding equity, understanding race, all those things, and just really trying to, because from what I understand from the conversations that I've had, some people have internal battles with, is this right or is this wrong? This is what my parents told me. This is what I've been raised to believe. This is, and even on the other side, if you're thinking about a Black person, not every white person is bad. There are really some allies out there. But I just really think reflecting and learning and continuing to grow is the most important part. But in order to even start to move forward, you have to figure out who you are and what some of those thoughts and biases that you have to even move forward, to even know, are you even blaming yourself for anything? Do I blame other people for everything? Even as a Black person, I blame white people for all these things. No, they weren't even alive during certain periods. So it's just, we have to look at, what is the blame? Who are you blaming? I think there's so many components to look at it. Shallegra, you got these really good questions that go really deep. But I just think just continuing to just understand yourself, and finding those safe people to have those conversations with, to unpack, because if you're sitting there trying to do it by yourself, who knows what tunnel you'll go down. So I think finding the right support in your decision making and your thought process to help you even just talk it out, not to give you answers, but just to help you, facilitate your own thoughts, I think be key into that growth.
Touche. Listen, we have about a minute left. I'm going to invite you all to drop your contact information in the chat, because this is a recorded session, which means that we may not be live and in person at SBL to answer these questions, but certainly we would want you to be able to reach out to learn more, to ask more questions. I will just add that I agree with what you all have said about breaking up with blame and moving into action. And for myself, it's been really important for me to name as Caitlin said, what my feelings are, right, about racism, racial equity, oppression generally, right? It's been really important for me, as Angelique said, to remember that all people aren't all bad at any given time, right? And to really think deeply about like who is in front of me, right? And what is this person's commitment, or how might I be helping this person, grow in a way they want to grow. And then what Shannon said about having a person, Shannon is my person. I think I'm Shannon's person, right? When I need to have uncomfortable, conversations about race and racism and oppression, like I need somebody who is white that I can say these things out loud, that I can grapple with, right, in a safe and loving and non-judgmental way. And Shannon does that for me. And so that is what I would add. Name it, embrace it, find somebody to work out, your learning and growth with, and go be great, because children are depending on us to get this thing right and to leave them a better existence than the one they currently have. And with that, I want to thank my panelists, my colleagues, my friends for spending this time with us today. In the words of one K. Chase Patterson at State of Black Learning 2022, how do we go from here? We go bravely. So I encourage you all to go bravely, have an amazing school year, and we'll look forward to seeing you around.